How's it going? How's everybody doing? So I'm completely down the rabbit hole and I can't seem to climb out. So I thought it would be nice to just do like a kind of like a beginner um, tutorial. I'm just going to go ahead and say it on creating some bead charms, like to take some beads, just, you know, plain old, plain old glass beads, wooden beads, plastic beads, whatever kind of beads you've got, and take something that's very simple like that and, turn it into something a little fancier and something, prettier. And some pretty easy ways that you can do that. And to be honest, like, you don't have to invest a ton of money in, make in doing that kind of stuff, really. I mean, you can spend a ton if you want, um, but there's ways of, reclaiming beads from junk jewelry, stuff from the thrift stores, using chain that, is, that you, when you've taken apart jewelry and things like that. But I just kind of wanted to talk about some of the basic supplies that someone who wants to maybe get into doing some wire work with beads, some real easy ways that you can do that, and kind of show you just a little bit of technique on how I do it. Of course, there's a million ways to do just about everything, but I'll show you what works for me and how I have figured out over the years to accomplish, making something that I'm proud of. So anyway, and just to kind of give you guys a little bit of background, this is what I used to do, like pretty much for a living. Is just I used to make jewelry, just beaded jewelry, and that was sort of my thing. I used to do craft shows and stuff like that when all my kids were little, and so I always had beads, and used to work for a bead wholesaler, and I was just very, very into it. And, got rid of all that stuff years ago when I sort of moved on from it. And now I'm sort of starting to get back into it, and I'm really enjoying it. So it's kind of fun. I have a tendency to go overboard when it comes to buying supplies and beads and stuff like that. So don't don't use me as an example of what you need to have, because really you don't need much. So let's just talk about some of the basics. The first thing is beads. Like I said, those, you can find beads super cheap at Hobby Lobby, Michael's, Joann's. Those stores, they cycle their 50% off all their bead sales every month. So, you can find beads for super cheap. And as a matter of fact, Hobby Lobby, if any of you guys are in my Facebook group, I posted a picture last night where I said I had gone in to Hobby Lobby to get some jump rings, and I wound up with a whole desk full of beads because their clearance, they have a lot of beads on clearance right now that they're phasing out. So it's a good time to go grab some beads. I didn't find a lot on Amazon when I started looking for, like decorative type of beads, glass beads. And I'm sort of a snob about beads. Like, not really a snob, but I really only like glass beads. I will use wooden beads or bone beads, things like that, but I just really try to stay away from plastic, just because that's just me, because in my experience, in my past life of, doing beadwork, you just can't sell stuff for any kind of money that is made with plastic beads. But if you have plastic beads and you're not trying to sell them, or even if you are, it's just personal choice is all, and there's some beautiful plastic beads. So whatever. Anyway, so basics. So the first thing you need is some beads. I mean, you can take apart necklaces that you find at the thrift store. A lot of times they're knotted together, like especially pearl necklaces. And sometimes those are plastic, but that's okay. Like they're, really all we're looking at as far as for this is just some round beads. Like they don't have to be a specific size or anything like that. I mean, you don't want little teeny tiny ones, but something maybe, I would say 12 millimeter maybe, or 8 millimeter even, but I think 12 millimeter is about, is about, that's a good size. So, this is like a 12 millimeter bead in here. So these are faceted. So they've got little like cuts all the way around them, kind of like a crystal. But these are actually stone beads. These are jasper. So, but then there's some, like crystal ones in there too. And excuse my hands, you guys. My hands are really super dry. I've been working like a dog, and I have a cut. That's not really a cut. I jammed my finger on something. Anyways, so beads. Grab some beads. And then I wanted to talk about wire and head pins and eye pins and that kind of stuff, because those are, I mean, necessary, right? It's really hard to reclaim wire, okay? Once wire has been bent, it's almost impossible to get it back to a point where it is usable again, or it just has a memory, like it's going to remember all of the bends that it's had. So, if you're going to buy some wire, I would recommend something kind of middle of the road as far as the gauge. So let's talk about that for just a minute. What gauge wire, will work. So if you're trying to make charms, okay, so you're basically wire wrapping a bead, you want to use something that's sort of sturdy, like it doesn't have to be, like a coat hanger or anything, but like this wire is 20 gauge. So the larger the number, the smaller the wire is going to be. Okay. The smaller the number, the bigger it's going to be. Okay. So this is a 20 gauge wire. So you can see it's not real big, but it's also not super thin. Like this is a 26 gauge wire. This might even be 28. But see how thin that is? And this wire is like, it's barely, like this wire, you probably can straighten it out because it's just so thin. This was my mom's. She gave it to me. So this is the kind of wire that is great for like boho beads, where, you want to wrap the wire around a bunch of times, and maybe if you don't have like tools, like wire working tools, this type of wire you can work just with your hands usually. So for like wrapping things, you know what I mean? Like wrap it around like some fabric or something, or whatever, or paper beads. It's great for wrapping paper beads. So anyways, I would recommend about a 20 gauge wire, or maybe 18. Okay. 18 would be a little bit heavier, and I'll show you that in just a second. You don't have to buy wire that's intended for beading. You can buy wire at the hardware store, and it works just fine. I mean, wire is wire. It doesn't matter. Like whatever the packaging is just the packaging, and they're just marketing it to a specific group of people. But copper wire is copper wire, whether it's packaged for beading or packaged for, electricians. So like this came from the hardware store a long time ago. So anyway, I just wanted to show you like some thinner wire. So this is probably a 28 gauge or 26, and this one is probably, 26 or so also. Anyway, so that's wire that I hardly ever use. But these are all 20 gauge. These came from Joann's. Back when I was making a lot of tassels, I was using this wire. And so as you can see, it comes in lots of different colors. I I rarely use these. I use them when I was doing the tassels, the kind of like boho style tassels. And I feel like I paid way more than I should have for this wire. I did buy it at Joann's, and it was about $4.50 a roll. And I don't know, like I was just looking on Amazon for wire, and you can find it a lot cheaper on Amazon. So I will leave some links in the description to some wire that that I actually just ordered, and because I felt like it was a really good value, and yeah, and it's a good amount, and it's a good price, and it's decent wire. It's a lot. So the roll that I ordered is a lot, and so there's a silver and then there's a brown, because I really like to work with like bronze color base metal stuff. So I got a brown one and a silver. So I don't really work with gold that much. So anyway, but that's just me. So I'm carrying on. But yeah, so 20 gauge wire is a really, really good weight for making beads. This is wire. This is stainless steel wire that it came from the hardware store, and it doesn't have any like shine to it. See, it's kind of dull. And this is just like this is like a utility wire. You can use this. It's probably going to rust though. No, this isn't stainless steel because it does rust. So, but it's steel anyway. It probably will rust and stuff. So like if you want to have kind of a grungy sort of look, you can get wire like this that will actually rust. So, and this is, I think, a 22 gauge, so it's a little thinner than these. So there's wire. These are thicker wires. So these are probably, this one is probably a 16 gauge. This is a 14 gauge wire. And this is aluminum wire. Now, aluminum wire is super, super bendy. Like, it's really soft. And it'll work. You can work with it. It's just that it doesn't hold its shape very well. Since it's so soft. Like, I mean, you can just, like, bend it super easy, you know? So I don't recommend that aluminum wire, but copper wire is probably the best, because it's sturdy, it's stiff, and it holds its shape. Like when you're making loops and stuff, you can trust that it's going to hold the shape. So anyway, that's my spiel on wire. And then the other thing that I work with a lot when I'm doing this are head pins. So head pins are basically just a piece of wire that has a little head on it, kind of like a nail, right? But it's not sharp. It's just a piece of wire. So it's like a piece of wire that has been cut, and then it's been hammered somehow so that it created like a little head on it, so that it won't go through a bead. It won't slip through a bead. Okay, with a small enough hole. So that's a head pin, and these come in different gauges also. This is an 18 gauge head pin, and it's probably 1 3/4 inches, something like that. I get my controversial, oh, it's 2 inches. These are 2 inches. My controversial ruler. So there's some brass ones and some bronze color ones in here. Okay. So those are head pins. Head pins can be decorative also. Like they can have almost like a little bead on the end. These came from Joann's too, I think. So those look kind of nice when you use those on bead charms. And these are just more head pins. They're just longer. And, you know, they're longer because, you know, you want to maybe I want to use them on larger beads. So you have to have a little bit on the end to work with. Okay, so those are head pins. And then there's also what they call ball pins. And ball pins literally are just like a head pin, except for they have a little ball on the end. So it's a little round, almost like a bead on the end. And a lot of times they use these, people use these when they're working with crystals, and they're like making little dangles, little crystals that dangle. You'll often see a little ball pen with those. So usually those are shorter because people will use these and make a lot of them for a project, and usually with very small beads. So, but anyway, so those are probably about an inch long. And then there are eye pins. I don't use that many eye pins. If I need an eye pin, I will generally just use wire. So an eye pin has a loop on one end so that you could attach something to one end, right? But it's open. It's an open loop, like it's not soldered. So, you can open that up and attach something in there. I should probably turn on the autofocus so you can see what I'm talking about. So yeah, so that's the eye pin. Okay, and I opened it up. So if you you can just close it right back up when you hook something on there, like a little charm or something. Okay, so eye pins are nice, and they come in different gauges and different lengths also, and also in different base metals or alloys and stuff like that. So anyway, so those are nice to have, but really you don't need those. All you really need is some wire, and you can do it, and then the other thing that I've been working with a lot, and this is kind of how to take some really simple beads and kind of kick them up a notch, and is to use some little bead caps. And these are they just fit over the end of a bead and kind of like enclose it, so it's like it puts a little decorative piece at the bottom and a little one at the top. You could add a bead underneath it too if you wanted to, but a lot of times, like if people are stringing beads, they'll add bead caps onto all of their beads, just because it's decorative and it's pretty. And you can find bead caps in all different designs, all different types of metal and stuff like that, and you don't have to spend a ton of money on them. I did order some on Amazon that are pretty much exactly like this. They were a really good deal, so I will also include that link in the description. And these are nice. These smaller bead caps are nice because you can use them on all different size beads. They don't have to go on a specific size bead. Like some bead caps are, the bigger ones, they sort of have to fit on a certain size bead, right? The larger the bead caps go, they kind of need to fit on a certain size bead, right? And then I also have taken some of these larger bead caps and made tassels with these, and that's what I got these for, was for making tassels. But you can make a tassel out of chain, and you pull it up inside there. And I should have grabbed one to show you, but I didn't really mean to get all this deep into it. But anyway, so it's almost like a little bell, and you can make that into like a tassel. So anyway, all kinds of things you can do with metal jewelry findings. Okay, so a couple of bead caps. We'll pull out a couple of bead caps, and I've got a bunch of different styles and stuff, but let's pull out just like a couple different ones. I've got these little tiny ones, and have you guys noticed that I put everything in clear plastic? I don't know if you noticed, but I really like these ones too, and I haven't used them yet. They're kind of cool. I like them. Kind of kind of steampunk looking, you know. Anyway, and I thought those would be nice for very small beads. Okay, so there's bead caps. Let's just use, just for the first one, we'll just use a piece of wire, okay? So, you know, depending on the bead you're going to use, generally you don't need a ton of wire, but wait, let me use one that's not faceted. Hold on. Use one that's not. Too shiny. So on a small bead like that, I would say, you know, to give yourself enough wire to work with, I would say maybe like 4 inches. And I know that seems like a lot, and there is going to be a little bit of waste, but believe me, it's better to have a little more wire than you need than not enough. So, okay, so the first thing I would do then is, you need to be able to stop the bead, right? You need to stop it from coming off. So we need to create some kind of, you know, stop at the end. And so what I normally do is I just create a loop. And this is what a head pin, or excuse me, an eye pin would do, right? It's like, it's a little loop on the end. But instead of making it just like an open loop, I'm actually going to wrap it around. So it's permanent, like it's not going to come open again. If I was trying to, and I've done tutorials on this before, so I apologize if this is redundant to anybody, but I do have a lot of new subscribers, and I think, you know, maybe they haven't seen it. So, but anyway, if I was going to be attaching something else on here that I never wanted to come off, I would put it on right now while I've got it at that point. Okay. And then I would wrap that wire around. But for now, we're just going to pretend like I didn't say that. So, oh, tools. I should talk about tools. I have people ask me about that. So, sorry, back up. I like to work with a pair of the same pliers. So these are made by the Beadsmith, and these are probably my favorite pliers that I've ever had. They're a nice size. They're bigger, and a lot of the beading pliers that you find, they're just, I mean, I have big hands, so, you know, I need a substantial handle, you know. So, I mean, you can find sets of beading pliers that are pretty cheap. So if, you know, if you're just going to do like a few here and there, just get a cheap set. It doesn't matter. Like, you know, you're not going to give yourself carpal tunnel syndrome by, you know, working with beads every couple months, right? But you do need to have something comfortable if it's something that you're going to use all the time, and, you know, like heavy, you know, if you're going to put it heavy use, get something that's comfortable. And, you know, you do get what you pay for when you buy tools, I think. Anyway, I was just showing you these because I think they have these at Hobby Lobby, and these are supposed to be like ergonomic, but I don't know. I don't know if I like them. I like these. So these are called chain nose pliers. Okay, so these are, they have no serration. They're not serrated at all, or, you know, there's no lines on them. There's no texture on the bed of the plier. Okay, so it's perfectly flat. So I can use these for lots of different things. I can even like straighten out wire sometimes with these, but they come to a nice small point. And they, you know, they're not real thick right here too. So like they can get into real small little spaces. So, I mean, these aren't the tiniest that I have, but these work pretty well for like all purpose, you know, chain nose pliers. Okay. Yeah. So these are my favorite, and I use 2 pairs of these, one in each hand. If I need to get into a real teeny little space, like in between my pliers and a bead, like if I have a bead right here, my pliers, and these are a little bit too thick, then I have these that are a little bit smaller. So, and the handles are smaller. I don't know why they don't make these in a longer handle, but these are also the Beadsmith. But see, they're smaller. The tip is ever so slightly smaller. So I always have these out too. I have another pair of chain nose pliers that are super, super skinny, but I hardly ever use them. So, but I like to keep these out just in case. And then I have some flush cutters, some side nip, cutters. So the reason they call them that is because the actual cutting surface is on the side of the blade, is on the side of the plier, right? Or the cutter or whatever. So that you can cut something real close, right up. I'm not going to cut myself, I promise. But you can cut right up on, flush to something rather than, like regular wire cutters. The cutting surface is in the center of that, I don't know what that's called. What do you call that? Anyway, so you want like a flush cutter, basically, is what you want for cutting wire and cutting off the excess wire. It's pretty important, and you need them also for cutting your wire. I have used the Tim Holtz scissors, the shears, okay, the ones that have the short blades, and then the nice chunky handles. I have used those to cut 20 gauge wire, and they work. But that's not, yeah, these you can cut wire with these, but I wouldn't use these as flush cutters, like for trimming off real close to the edge of something, just because I don't really think they would work very well for that. Anyway, if you only have 2 pairs of pliers and 1 cutter, you can still do it. But I think it's a really, really good idea to have some round nose pliers. Round nose pliers are how you get a really nice loop. And there really isn't a substitute for that. You can almost get a nice loop with a chain nose because, see, it's kind of rounded on the top. So if you're really, really diligent, you can actually get a rounded loop by using the top of this plier. But if you're going to buy some pliers, just get a set, because the set is going to have the cutters, the round nose pliers, and at least 1 pair of chain nose pliers. And then sometimes there's like bent nose pliers where this part is actually bent at like I don't know what degree angle that is, but they're kind of bent, and that helps you get into real tight little places too. So as long as you have 2 pairs of pliers, you can do it. One is going to be holding the work, and the other one is going to be working the wire. All right. We could talk about like jump rings and stuff like that. And if we get to it, maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll do 2 videos, but I just wanted to talk about some of the basic stuff about, the materials and things like that you need for making some little bead charms for for somebody really at the very beginner level. Anyway, so we got a bead, and then what we're going to do is pretend I didn't do this yet. Okay, so pretend I didn't make that loop yet. So I'm going to take my round nose pliers, and you can see that as it, the further up you get on here, the larger loop you're going to create, right? So I generally stay like right about down here somewhere. You kind of get a feel for it, like what size loop is where, So like if I come way out to the end of this and make a loop, like I'm just twisting the wire away from me. So I'm going to get a pretty small little loop. It's pretty tiny. Sorry about the autofocus. I'll try to be aware of it because I know it's really annoying and it gives people a stomach ache. So that's a pretty small little loop. If I'm up further on the plier, obviously, I'm going to have a much larger loop. Okay. So that's kind of how you can tell. Like, you need to sort of judge how much wire that's going to take up when you're trying to make your loops. So anyway, one thing you can do is actually put a little piece of tape or use a Sharpie or something and make a little mark on here where you figure out like, okay, I'm pretty comfortable with making loops that size and I want to always make my loops consistent and I want them to always be that size. Just take a little, like make a little mark on here, you know, and that way you know where to place your plier when you're making your loop. So I just always just kind of eyeball it, and I guess I come up about 1/4 of an inch. All right, so I'm gonna twist away from myself. I'm just gonna keep going. I loosen it, grab it again, turn it some more until this part is looking at me, until the end of the wire is looking right up at me. Okay, so I put like a perfect loop in there. It's like a little, like a tendril. Okay, so they've got that like that. And then what I do is I grab it again right at the base of the loop, and then I kick it back towards me. Okay, so what that does is it creates a tiny little like bend backwards in the wire. So now my loop is going to be straight. It'll be straight up and down. Like if you look at it like that, this is hard to explain, but see how that loop is going straight up instead of being over on the side? That's how that happens. I have that little backwards bend at the back of my loop to give it that nice angle so that it goes perfectly straight up and down. Oh, it's hard to explain that. Okay, so then I just want to make a loop on here, and I'm not going to worry about trying to attach anything right now. So I'm going to grab this with one of my pliers in a, flat like that. Okay, so I'm holding it flat, and you want to hold it kind of snug. It doesn't have to be like, super snug, but I mean, you don't want to start bending the wire again. You just want to hold it secure. So I have to switch hands. So I'm going to hold it with my left hand, and I'm always switching these pliers. Like I'm always grabbing one way or the other. Anyway, so then I'm going to come from underneath, and I'm going to pull this. I'm going to grab the end of this wire. So you need to hold it so it doesn't move. And I'm going to pull this one down, and I'm just going to work it all the way around. And as I pull it around, I want it to be flush with the wire. I want it to stay flush with itself, kind of like a coil, right? So I'm not pulling it this way. I'm just going straight around like that, to make sure that it just lays down right along the previous wrap. Okay. So if you notice that the tail starts to kind of come down, you can take your other plier and grab it like this and just kind of squeeze it back up. You'll see what I'm talking about if you try to do this. So now I've got my loop, and it's basically locked on there. Like it's not going to come off. It's got a wrap of wire around it, so it's not going to come undone. Okay, and this is the most secure way of building jewelry. by doing your wraps like that instead of just a regular loop. That's how you know that it's not going to come off. It would take a lot of force to break that. You know, it doesn't take a lot of force to open up an eye pin or a jump ring, you know. Anyway, so we've got a loop and we've got plenty of wire to work with for this small bead, right? Okay, so first thing I want to do is take one of these little bead caps and I'm going to put it on with the concave side up, okay? Because the bead is going to sit down inside that, you know, curved area. Put the bead on. And then another, if I can grab it, I have no fingernails. Okay, and then the other bead cap. Okay, like that. So see, I don't know. I just think that looks really pretty like that. It really just makes a simple round glass bead elegant, I think. Okay, so this is where I'm talking about knowing how much wire your loop is going to take up. So what I do is I kind of judge by my finger, like the depth of my finger. I hold my bead just like that in my hand. And then I rest the plier on my on the other part of my finger like that, and I still go that 1/4 inch up the blade of the plier, the, you know, the, what do they call that thing? I need to know what that is called. You don't realize how hard it is to explain something until you try to explain it. Anyway, so that's about how I grab it. And then I start turning. Oh, wait a second. Hold on. Hold the phone. That's way more. Hold on. I must grab it lower. Yeah. I usually grab it, I think, about right there. I never realize how I do this, but it's usually always the same. So it's about like that, I guess. It's maybe like a 1/2 inch. Okay. So then I'd make that loop again. And then kick it back a 1/2 turn. Okay, so I've got that vertical loop again. Do you see what I'm talking about? See how it makes that loop go back straight up? So it doesn't look like a letter P, a backwards P. It looks more like a loop. And then I've still got a little bit of a gap. Where's these other pliers? I've still got a little bit of a gap in between where those wires cross and the top of that bead cap. Okay. I mean, it's maybe like 2 millimeters or so. Okay. You want to have a little bit of space there so that you can wrap your wire around that, and, you know, and that it'll be the same as the bottom. To me, it doesn't matter if I have more coils on the top than the bottom or whatever, or the other way around. I don't think that matters, especially if I'm just using it like a charm. But if you're trying to make like a chain, like I was going to do a tutorial and talk about making a bead chain, then it's important that you get the same number of loops on both sides if you want them to be really consistent, you know. So that's just something that takes a lot of practice, and, you know, figuring out how you work, and, you know, how much wire you are going to use. So anyway, so now I need to wrap this. So I'm going to grab it with the pliers again in my right hand, and I'm going to switch hands and take my other pliers, and I'm going to wrap this towards myself straight. You want to keep this wire, you know, out. You don't want to pull it down like that. You really want it to be like parallel to the pliers as you're pulling it around. Try to keep it as parallel as you can. And always grab this wire out further at the end. Don't grab it up here. Try keeping your plier out here and keeping a little bit of tension on it to keep it straight. Okay, so we'll wrap that around as many times as you need to where you feel like there's a little, so you've got like 2 coils on there now, and there's still enough of a gap in between those coils, in between these 2 coils that I have on there and the bead cap. There's a little bit of a gap, and it's about the width of a piece of wire. And I know that I'm only going to be able to wrap this around one more time and keep it flush. So I'm going to cut this off now with a little bit of length so that I have a little bit of length to actually wrap around the rest of it. Okay, so it's, you know, maybe 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to cut that off now. And then again, I'm going to grab this with my pliers. And it's going to be difficult to grab this little end, but you know, you can. It's just, it's kind of hard to hold on to, and it's a little fidgety. So the best thing to do is to just go take your pliers flat now and just start working it around. Like I'm just squeezing it flush up to itself and continuing to make my coil. So I'm going to turn this over now because the end of the wire is on the bottom, so I want it to be accessible. So I just keep working it down until it's flush. Okay, and then hold this pretty tight, and then you want to take your plier and just kind of smooth it out. Okay, like grab it and then just kind of like that, and that sort of, you know, smooths off that that end of the wire where you cut it off. So it's not going to snag on things, you know. So yeah, so there's a little wire wrapped bead charm thingy with bead caps. So yeah, and see, I've got 2 coils on this end and 3 coils on that end, and that doesn't really bother me at all, unless I was trying to make a bead chain and like for a bracelet or something, and I was just linking these together down the road or down the row, then I would want them to be even. So, but see, this bead doesn't move around. It's real snug. It doesn't have a lot of play. And, you know, I mean, I can turn it, but it's nicely, you know, it's firm. And I think that, I like that better. Like, I don't like to be able to see that wire going into the bead. I like it to look more stable. So anyway, let's do another one. Let's do one a little bigger. Some of these were kind of fun. So you don't have to use bead caps. Like we could do like a larger bead and do it with, let's find a bigger bead. Whoops. Let's just do like this one. Like this is just like this is a plastic bead, by the way. You can tap it on your tooth and tell. And it's funny because this came on a strand of beads where most of the beads were glass, but they snuck in a plastic one. Anyway, whatever. Okay, so let's do this one with a head pin. So I'm going to grab kind of a longer head pin, right? This is like a 3-inch one with a little head on it. And then to kind of decorate this a little bit, I can't really use a bead cap because this bead is sort of like oval shaped and those are round. I mean, it might fit on there, but I wanted to show you something else. Anyway, so this little head on here is probably going to slip through that bead. Like, yeah, see, it came right through that bead because the hole is too big. So I'm just going to add like a little, like a spacer bead, or you could use like a seed bead, like a little tiny seed bead would work. But I like to use like a little spacer bead. These are some old like brass beads that I've had for a long time. Let me show you something that they do have pretty accessible. Most places where they sell beads are these little guys. Hold on. Beads like that. It's like a little, it's called a spacer bead. So like you would put that in between beads that you were stringing together. So it's just like a little silver metal bead. Okay. So you could use like a little spacer bead or any kind of little flat bead, or even just like a round seed bead, like I said. So a seed bead is just like a little, like a small bead like that, little glass bead. That's actually a large seed bead, but anyway. So just, you want something that is small enough that that head pin's not going to come through it, and that you can kind of cap the end of that bead. So I'm just using another bead at the end. So it's sort of like one of these little decorative head pins, but I've just kind of made that myself because these aren't cheap. These are, you know, anyway, so you can sort of get the same type of look and the, you know, as those decorated ones. Anyway, so put that one on there, and then we'll do another one of those guys, and then we're just going to loop it off again. So everyone remember where I'm going to grab it. Okay, so about right there. So if you, I'll do this one a little bit longer so you can see how it looks when there's more coils. So I'll do this one up a little bit higher, and I don't know if this is gonna take up all the excess wire or not, but we'll see. So see how that's longer? Yeah, I think it's gonna wind up being loose, but so now I'm gonna pull that so it's flush. Gotta hold this real tight and start wrapping this around. And you can see how it's, can you guys see? Oh my God, sorry. Can you guys see how it's coiling along that wire now? Hold on, I'll show it to you again up close. Better. So you can see how it's, coiling along that wire. Okay. Oh my God, this video is like almost an hour long already. Okay, so I'm just going to continue wrapping this around. See how close it gets. When you're working, when it's a little bit longer like this, it's a little more difficult to hold on to because the wire wants to bend. So I'm going to just do it like this. Sometimes you gotta just fight with it, but trying to keep it so you guys can see it, and it's making it a little more fussy. Hold on. There. Yeah, it was a little bit too long. Okay. Well, that's almost right. Okay. So I'll show you what I was fighting with. There's kind of like a gap in between the coils right there. See that gap between that bead on the top and the bottom coil? So yeah, there's a gap there. And so the tail of the wire I was wrapping around is actually, that bottom coil is open, and the tail of that wire is actually holding this bead down now. So I don't have a lot of like slack in here. So this doesn't move a lot. And kind of like a spring would be holding that down. But I don't like that you can see that base wire inside there. I just think it makes it look kind of like, I don't know. For me, I just don't like it, but it's okay. I mean, it's not a huge deal, right? Anyway, and then see how my loop is off center a little bit? So I'm just going to take these pliers and I'm just going to kick it back a little bit to straighten it up. There. So I don't know. I think these are just fun to make. I like to just, I mean, if I want to just sit in bed and watch TV or something, I'll just sit there and make bead charms, you know. And then, you know, like when you have that loop on one end, you could use jump rings and attach a charm, or you could even, you know, attach another bead on there. And I think that would be really pretty, you know. So, and you could make that into a pendant that you could wear, or you could put these on a piece of chain and make a bracelet, or, you know, or a dangle for your junk journal, you know. Anyway, so that's it. I'm gonna watch this video and see if I'm gonna even upload it. But I hope that was a little bit helpful for, you know, somebody who has never done this kind of thing before. And yeah, so thanks for watching, and look in the description for links to some of the stuff that I used and for that wire that I mentioned, just because it really is a pretty good deal on that wire. So way more wire than this for much less money. So anyway, okay guys, love you. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.